What's up, everybody? Welcome to Stacking the Box College Football Edition. We are here to get you set for, without a doubt, the biggest slate of the college football season. We got 6 ranked-on-ranked matchups, one of them being Colorado taking their undefeated record to Autzen Stadium to take on the Oregon Ducks, catching 3 touchdowns. We're going to get into that as well as Alabama, Ole Miss, Clemson, Florida State, Ohio State, Notre Dame. Huge slate. I'm your host, Reed Wallach, joined today by Cody Williams. Cody, how's it going, man?
I'm doing okay overall. Licking my wounds from a 1-5 week, but we'll bounce back. We always do.
Yeah, I mean, listen, everyone loses. It's okay.
It's
true. You're going to have good weeks. You're going to have bad weeks. Overall this year, we got to pick it up. I'm sitting at 12-13. You're sitting at 11-14. I had a bad week 2 weeks ago. I got back on the horse 4-2. So let's hope one of us at least could get into the positives here, make some people some money on the year-to-date numbers. Speaking of, I can't miss opportunities. I got to tell you about what DraftKings is doing this football season. They've upped their promotion. We told you about the deposit, bet 5, you get 200 in bonus bets. They've upped it. It's now deposit $5, place a bet on anything. You get $200 in bonus bets plus $150 back in bonus bets if your team loses. So all you have to do is use the code STB, stands for Stacking the Box, this fine program. Again, that's STB. And not only get you these bonuses, but it also is helping this podcast. So if you've been considering signing up for DraftKings, make sure to use the code STB to maximize your first bets. Again, that's deposit 5, get 200 in bonus bets. And if that team loses, you get $150 in bonus bets. So if you want to maximize your joining DraftKings and helping out this podcast, make sure to do that. This offer is only available to new customers who are 21 plus and physically present in legal gambling states. Please remember to always gamble responsibly. Check out the episode description below for the full terms on the offer to see if you qualify. Again, that's code STB. All right. We're skipping our little intro recap, what happened, how we're feeling. We're getting right into this stuff because we have plenty of games we want to get to. Cody, how are you? Do you want to set the stage here? How are you feeling ahead of a week? Do you feel like you're seeing the board well? I know you said bad week last week, but are you still feel like this is operating well for you? Because you had a hot start to the year.
Yeah, I definitely do. I think last week we got caught in a lot of spots where, it was look ahead spots too this week. Like you look at, we're going to talk about Florida State, Clemson. You look at Florida State, Boston College, which I was obviously on the Florida State side of that. And Florida State mailed it in the late stages of that game and almost got caught. And then, you had there was some excitement, like Colorado State was exciting, but I mean, that was also a weird game for Colorado. They should have blown the doors off Colorado State. So I think we're coming off a week where what a lot of these teams actually are might have been hidden by look ahead spots or tricky spots or bad opponents in the case of Ohio State, which was another pick I lost.
Yeah, we won't talk about my loss on a Georgia Tech Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin. Yeah. That hurt all the scoring there and Lane deciding to run in. But also just don't onside kick it there, Buster, Brent Key. Whatever. We move. We got a new week here. Right. Like I said, I'm 12-13 on the year. Cody's 11-14. If I had to guess, when we talk to you for the week 5 preview, one of us will be over 500. Hopefully, both of us. Let's start. You mentioned Florida State in the red bandana game. Florida State traveling to Death Valley to take on Clemson. Last time we saw Clemson in front of a national audience, they vomited all over themselves, much to my pain, as I was a pretty big Clemson believer heading into the year. But they have a chance to right their wrongs here. Clemson wins this one. They're right back in the mix for the ACC title, maybe outside shot the college football playoff. Florida State, like you said, bit of a rocky game against BC. They start slow. They end up kind of putting themselves in a chance of losing. Let Thomas Castellanos run wild. He passed for over 300 yards and nearly ran for 100. Setting up this matchup, Florida State, a 2.5-point road favorite against Clemson. I think I saw this for the first time in 9 years since Lamar Jackson was there. Maybe it's 7 years, but since Lamar Jackson went to Clemson, that Clemson is a home underdog. So this is a really big change in expectation for the Tigers. Total sit at 55. Cody, how do you see this one playing out?
This shouldn't shock anyone that's not new to the program, but I'm taking Florida State minus the 2.5. I understand that the Boston College game got ugly, but they also did get up 31-10 in that game. And then they seemed to like just be looking to get out of Dodge, and they almost got clipped because of it. Obviously, like it didn't turn out the way that you want those types of games. Like they didn't have the cruise control. But when I look at this Clemson team, we still haven't seen them perform offensively against like notable competition. Like it was Charleston Southern, and then last week I'm totally blanking on who they played.
The Florida Atlantic.
Florida Atlantic, yeah, who we saw is not, Tom Herman hasn't done a great job getting that program, or not, sorry, that not to disparage Tom Herman. He hasn't had a chance to build that program back up yet. But at the same time, like we haven't seen this offense perform against high-level competition yet, and they looked, pedestrian against a team like Duke. Understanding this game's at home, I think that the Clemson defense, like they're improved in the secondary from last year, which was a big problem for them. But I think that Florida State's weapons are kind of matchup proof. Like you look at a Keon Coleman, a Johnny Wilson, Jaheim Bell, Trey Benson, like these guys are talented enough to go to the NFL, go to the next level. And a lot of college football defensive backs, even if it's a good secondary, are going to have trouble defending them. And then more importantly, I think that when you look at the Clemson offense and Cade Klubnik, who, mind you, has still not performed up to, his talent level, his recruiting pedigree in a big spot yet. I don't like the one way you attack this Florida State defense is with their secondary, which is still relatively, suspect in some areas. We saw it last week in that, late against Boston College with Castellanos. But I don't think Bo Collins and Antonio Williams are the type of like game-changing weapons that are going to like truly be able to take advantage of that matchup. And when it comes down to it, I just think Florida State is the better team in this matchup. And I think that Jordan Travis has been in these big spots, and in recent history, we've seen him succeed in these big spots. So I think it's Florida State, even as a road favorite.
Yeah, I can't. It's tough to trust Clemson. I will say I do wonder, has Clemson maybe started to find something, and maybe this takes a few weeks to get this Garrett Riley system set up. I mean, you go back to that Duke game again, didn't punt in the second half, had a 48% success rate, which would have graded out across all the games in 2022 as an 82nd percentile type game. So, I mean, Clemson on paper destroyed Duke. If you just looked at the numbers, you would have said Clemson won that game. It just fumbles inside the red zone, and it goes back to what I said when we kind of recap that game. When you're not having explosive plays, it puts a lot of pressure on you down to execute and, limit mistakes. I don't know if I could trust Clemson to win this game or cover at that point, but I do think that this Florida State defense is a little overrated. I think Florida State's offense has a pretty high floor, so I went with the over as my best bet in this one. I think that would be where I lean at 55 right now, one of the most popular landing totals in college football. To me, Florida State, you go back at that LSU game, that was an even game for 3.5 quarters, back and forth. LSU moved the ball on them pretty well. I think Clemson at home could, hopefully Garrett Riley gets the keys and could scheme up a few big plays. Thomas Castellanos ran wild. Cade Klubnik has shown an ability to run a little bit and use his legs. And I mean, we saw last year at TCU with Garrett Riley as the coordinator. Max Duggan, timely first down runs as quarterback design. RPO, keeping it himself. Maybe that's how they start to loosen up this Florida State defense. I mean, say what you want. They beat LSU. It's a tough schedule relative, I guess, playing LSU. That's tough on a neutral. Beat Southern Miss and then at Boston College. Florida State grades out as a bottom half of the country in terms of EPA per play. So they're allowing chunk plays still. Yeah. I think Florida State has a pretty high floor on offense. Like, I don't think Clemson is able to win this one 17-14. I just think Florida State has so many weapons that they're gonna get theirs. I think for Clemson to win this one, got to keep it into like, mid 20s ish, higher 20s, something in the neighborhood of 28, 24, I think could potentially get this done. But I think FSU's getting at least 3 scores, probably more. I think very highly of this Clemson defense. I just think maybe this Florida State defense is a weaker part than we think. And listen, it's going to be weakness on weakness and strength on strength with the FSU offense versus the Clemson defense and the Clemson offense versus the Florida State defense. So I think a lot to be decided. I think that there's a lot of questions. I'm not itching to back Clemson after what they did to me in week 1. But that being said, I think that there might be a little more points than expected. I just think maybe Clemson's offense that Duke total where they only scored, 7 points? Yeah, 7 points. I think maybe that's deflating the expectation a little bit. And I think Clemson offense, maybe not great, but a little bit better.
No, and I don't even disagree with the over as a play here. I think that you're completely right. Like, this Florida State defense is probably what's going to be like, could cost them a spot at the college football playoff if they slip up at another spot on the schedule and something like that. But I look at the way they played in that second half of the Boston College game, where it got so conservative that it was detrimental, that it's very clear to me it's one of these spots like we saw it a few weeks ago with Texas playing Rice in the opener. And it was like, oh, well, is Texas actually, ready to beat Alabama? It turns out that they were just game planning for Alabama. Florida State's game planning for Clemson because it's the game that matters on the schedule. They can't lose this one. And it's also a signature win for their college football playoff resume. And so I'm not reading much into what we saw last week, which definitely affects their EPA per play because they clearly could not stop Castellanos. But I don't think they were also like putting forth, the maximum amount of effort or the maximum amount of schematics for that matter. So, but I do agree with you that the defense still does have some issues that Clemson could take advantage of. I think there's going to be more points than we expect, but in a game that's going to feature that could more or less come down to whose offense is better, I'm always going to trust Florida State, even in a tougher matchup.
Mm-hmm. We shall see. That'll be an interesting one. Noon Eastern kickoff, ABC, I'm pretty sure. Let's go to Tuscaloosa. Let's talk about Alabama. Before we get to the game itself, they are hosting Ole Miss. Alabama laying a touchdown. Total of 55.5. Alabama, how do I put this nicely?
There's no way to put it nicely.
An identity crisis, a loss of their way. I don't even know how to put it into words, but this is the most confused and distraught I've seen a Nick Saban-led team, maybe in recent memory. This is a team that benched Jalen Milroe. There seems to be reports that maybe he was a light suspension benching after being asked to split reps with Tyler Buckner in practice. Apparently he didn't take too lightly to that. So Buckner gets a start against South Florida, looks terrible. They go to Ty Simpson. He doesn't look much better. They end up beating South Florida 17-3 as 32-point favorites. Milroe's going to start again this one. I mentioned when we recapped the Texas game, I don't think he played as bad as the coaching staff put him in a position to the coaching staff did not put him in a position to succeed in that game.
Right.
We'll see if they change it up. I don't know. They had a players only meeting earlier this week. Lane Kiffin's talking about he thinks the DC's been demoted. There's a lot going on here, especially with Lane Kiffin on the other sideline. Cody, any thoughts on the state of the Crimson Tide before you give your best bet out?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be concerned by it. Like, it's not just I can fully understand after the Texas game, wanting to see the other quarterbacks against the team that ostensibly the defense is going to be able to shut down, which is what happened. Like, Buckner and Simpson played horrendously, and they still won the game by 2 touchdowns because the defense was like, okay, South Florida, chill out for a second. But, when you get down to it, the fact that they're not confident in the quarterback, they're not confident in a quarterback, not one of the 3. And then you have, an offense that is, I've said this for a couple of years now, but Alabama does not have the same level of receiving talent and the weapons that they had previously. But my biggest concern is the offensive line. This was supposed to be one of the best offensive lines in the country, and they're giving up pressure at a pretty staggering and unfortunate rate for Alabama. And when you have uncertainty at quarterback, that's a big problem. Milroe is probably the best option to get out of that because he's the most mobile and the most dangerous with his legs. But that wasn't expected to be a problem for this team. And so that's what worries me a ton. And on top of that, there was a lot of criticism after the Texas game about the defense, Kevin Steele's defense. And, Lane Kiffin is stirring the pot as he does. Let's not forget when he said, get your popcorn ready before playing Alabama, that one a couple years ago, and then proceeded to get absolutely scorched by Saban. But at the same time, that defense showed a propensity to give up big plays. I don't think there's a lot of worries about the defense, but I do think they are susceptible to well-schemed big plays from playmakers. Does Ole Miss have those playmakers? I'm not entirely sure, but they are susceptible to that. So I think there's a lot of reason to be concerned about Alabama.
100%. Back to your offensive line point. Worst sack rate allowed in the Power 5 right now. Ole Miss has 10 sacks through 3 games. So this is a big concern. I think you look at the Ole Miss side, because listen, 2 teams are on the field. Jackson Dart is playing at a very high level. Second year in the Lane Kiffin system, and it took a little bit for them to get going against Georgia Tech. I watched that one with very keen eyes, given the financial investment I had in the game. But it took them a while to get going, Ole Miss. And I will say, Quinshon Judkins has been banged up. Trey Harris didn't even play last week. Zachary Franklin, the highly touted UTSA transfer, he hasn't played yet. Apparently practicing this week. Maybe Franklin gets on the field. Harris expected to be back. And Judkins, he was limited on the field, but they have a pretty nice stable of running backs there. So Dart's been playing, though, with a I don't want to say like one hand tied behind her back, but like this hasn't been the full staple of Ole Miss talent at the skill positions. And Jackson Dart's still been playing at a very, very high level. Of course, you're playing Alabama now, not Tulane and Georgia Tech and Mercer.
Correct.
So there is a jump there expected. I do think you're going to see Ole Miss get off to a hot start because Lane Kiffin, I think, is one of the best play designers in the entire country. And it feels like, and he has in the past, he's played Alabama tough, and it seems like he has a little beat on what they're going to do. He used to work with defensive coordinator at Alabama. Now I'm drawing a blank on his name, Kevin Steele.
Kevin Steele, yeah.
Kevin Steele used to work with him at Alabama. So has a beat there. I think Ole Miss, this is the best chance they have of winning this one. I think that they come in the closest in terms of talent, closest in terms of quarterback play, especially. I think Ole Miss is definitely live in this one. I think the spread has kind of adjusted nicely to where it should be. I'll give out my play. I like the under for a lot of the things we've noted. I think Alabama's offensive line is a huge concern. I think this team has no identity on offense. I don't trust them to put up a big number, and I'm not really a believer that they're going to try and put up a big number, that they're going to try and push this to a high 20s type of game. You look at the Texas game, for example, and Texas is much better than Ole Miss. But that game was 13-9 with 2 to 3 minutes left in the third quarter. That game was a dead under game that got sideways at the end when Milroe hit a big pass, then Ewers hit a big pass, and then Milroe threw an untimely interception in his own end zone, basically. I think that Alabama wants to play under games. I think Ole Miss's offense maybe runs into some trouble against the physicality of Alabama's defense. I think this game ends up being much slower in terms of production on the field. And I think this game shapes out like an under. I honestly think Ole Miss is going to win this one. So I'll say it. I'll go like Ole Miss 24-21, something like that, low 20s. I think Alabama, that offense isn't right, and I can't trust them as a big favorite to really put on a score. I mean, this is like pretty average college football game. This one looks more like below average. Both teams last year, which includes Bryce Young on the field, below 5 yards per play on offense. So that was, these are two teams that have shut each other down recently.
I love you, Reed. You're a great co-host, great friend, but we're fighting. We're fighting on this one.
Let's go.
I'm going to over 55.
Only one of us can come out alive. There's a half point on this one. There's no ties here. Winner takes all.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no middle ground to be had here. No different numbers. Over 55.5 for me in this one. I understand that's what Alabama wants to do. I am not, like I said, I'm not confident in this defense's ability to limit explosive plays. I understand that the physicality in previous years has definitely affected this Ole Miss team, but I think Jackson Dart has performed way, you mentioned it. Jackson Dart's performed way better than I thought Jackson Dart was capable of performing, quite frankly. And from everything we'd seen from him prior to this season. And especially if they get Zachary Franklin back, who was one of the best wide receivers that not a lot of people knew about last year because he was at UTSA. Like, he's an incredibly talented player. If he's playing in this game, if they get Harris back, this is a deep stable of wide receivers. And I look at this game, or I look at this Ole Miss offense, and I see it's not obviously identical, but especially with Charlie Weiss Jr.'s influence, the OC under Lane Kiffin, there's a little bit of Tennessee Josh Heupelness to it. And we saw what that Tennessee offense with weapons, with a capable quarterback, which Jackson Dart has proven to be, is capable of doing against this Alabama defense. And so I think that they're going to give up some big plays, and that under game that Alabama and Nick Saban and Kevin Steele want is not going to be an option for them, because I think Ole Miss is going to put the pressure on them to where it's not the case. And then on the flip side of that, I don't have a ton of faith in Milroe, but one thing I've seen from this Ole Miss defense when they're getting pressure is they actually have a really bad propensity for getting out of their rush lanes to get pressure. And so like Haynes King, who is somewhat mobile, but not like the most mobile guy, had 42 rush yards last week, and that's with the sack numbers adjusted in there too.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, Horton had some nice runs, the backup quarterback for Tulane. So Milroe's a much more gifted and talented runner than any of those. So I think they could break off some big explosive plays with Milroe's legs that then opens up the run game for Roydell Williams, Jason McClellan, who were they were the only successful parts of the offense last week. And so I think when you have that kind of, juxtaposition, I think we're looking at a game that might end up in the like 31-28 range. I think it's going to be like I don't think either one of us was going to win our bet. Whoever wins in this fight, I don't think it's going to be like, oh, wow, it was over by a mile, or wow, it was under by a mile. I think it's going to be pretty close to that 55.5 total. So I think we're both going to be sweating on this one, but I have more faith in what these offenses are capable of in this matchup.
That I can't trust this Alabama offense right now. I can't. There's been zero evidence this season outside of one Jalen Milroe throw to Burden that this offense can get vertical, that this offense can rip off chunk plays. I mean, look at it's a 3-game sample size, but you kind of blend in what's happened. I mean, they played Middle Tennessee, who was outmatched. They played Texas, obviously high-level game. That didn't work out. And then you play South Florida, who's one of the 10, 15 worst defense in the country, and they couldn't get anything. Granted, hurricane, whatever you want to call that, but still, look at the numbers. This is an average Alabama offense nationally. I mean, 74th in EPA per play, 99th in EPA per pass. I think this Ole Miss defense, while you make a good point about the rush lanes and maybe losing contain, don't you think that that's going to be the directive now that Nick Saban's already announced that Jalen Milroe is the starter? Isn't this just going to be, all right, we're stacking the box. We're not letting we're spying. We are not letting Jalen Milroe loose. We are keeping an eye on him, and we're not going to let him rip off chunk plays because we're going to dare this guy to beat us over the top, because which guy, like you mentioned, which guy's going to beat us? Let him beat us once. He's more likely going to throw a pick.
So first off, we're always stacking the box here. Let's be clear about that. But secondly, I think that one of the things that has been kind of buzzing, like you mentioned that Milroe may have been like soft suspended for the South Florida game. One of the things that's kind of been buzzing a little bit is that there's kind of been a power struggle within the Alabama coaching staff about Reese wanting Buckner, the quarterback he's comfortable with, and Saban wanting Milroe as the guy that gives them the best chance to succeed with their current roster. And I have to wonder if what we saw last week with how poorly Buckner and Simpson performed doesn't force Reese into a position more or less to where he's more like he's trying to cater the offense to Milroe, not trying to get Milroe to cater to his offense. And so I think we could see
that's why they should have started him against South Florida.
Oh, you're not wrong.
That was like a necessary time against a really bad defense to really kind of run around and see what works. Now you're going right into SEC play. They don't seem to have anything going. Like, it's not like Alabama's entering this one like, all right, we know we're about to, quarterback design runs, and it's not like we've been like slow playing this one and we're going to unleash the playbook. This is a team that does not know what they want right now.
And I'm 100% with you. I mean, to be clear, I also have Ole Miss winning in this game. So, like, I'm with you on that. It's not like an overwhelming amount of faith that I have in what this Alabama offense is capable of. But I also don't have a ton of faith in this Ole Miss defense other than getting pressure. Like, their secondary is not great. I understand Alabama doesn't have the weapons to beat them consistently. But I do think that we could see something similar to what we saw with, like, the Ian Book offense at Notre Dame, which, granted, wasn't a world beater, but it was effective, where they ran Book a lot and you have a much more effective runner in Jalen Milroe. So I think that, I understand that, like, they should have done it against South Florida. And yes, they should have been running this offense since the spring. But I do think Reese has it in the playbook, and that there probably has been some coaching to, ready them for a moment when they need to make a switch like this.
We shall see. That
Absolutely
should be one of the more interesting games on the card. Let's go to another interesting for maybe what's happening before the game, off the field, and everything else, maybe besides what's on the field. But that's Oregon, Colorado. Colorado escapes as 24-point favorites against Colorado State. in double overtime, needs a Shedeur Sanders masterclass in the final minutes to escape with a win. Colorado now travels to Oregon to face a college football playoff hopeful in the Ducks. They are catching 21. The total currently sits at a nice juicy 70.5. They are expecting a track meet, a basketball game at Autzen Stadium this weekend. Cody, do you think that the Colorado hype train stops here? They are handed their first loss. Obviously, odds makers are expecting that, but week one this year, they did beat TCU as 3-touchdown underdog. So how do you see it playing out?
So the buck stops here, or as the title of the episode, the buffs stop here. But I don't see Colorado's. I mean, it really comes down to Colorado's defense. I don't have faith in this unit that allowed 42 points to Chandler freaking Morris in that TCU game. And now you're going up against a legitimate Heisman candidate in Bo Nix. I've been highly critical of Bo Nix for his entire career, basically. Like, I think that there's a lot of flaws with him as a quarterback, even at Oregon. But I do know he's been effective in this Oregon offense. And they're just going to dice up this Colorado defense. Like, if Oregon put up 60, it would not surprise me by themselves. But the way I'm playing this is the Colorado team total over 24.5, because the dirty secret about Oregon, that because everyone is enamored with Bo Nix in the offense, is that this defense is not particularly good. They're ranked 40th right now in Bill Connolly's SP Plus rankings on defense. And you look at this Colorado team, and basically everything they've done successfully to get to this 3-0 start has been predicated on Shedeur Sanders in this offense and big plays and explosive plays with Dylan Edwards, Jimmy Horn Jr. And we've seen nothing from Oregon that should make us think otherwise. Like, this is an Oregon team that should have lost in Lubbock to Texas Tech if Texas Tech didn't start shooting itself in the foot in the fourth quarter. And they allowed 30 points to a Texas Tech offense, which I think Colorado is a flawed team, but this Colorado offense is substantially better than that Texas Tech offense in terms of the talent they have. I understand that maybe not in the trenches. I'll give you that. But in terms of the playmakers and the weapons and the ability to reel off explosive plays. And, I look at this game and I think Oregon's probably going to get out to a lead if they get some stops. And that's going to cause them to, soften up. And Shedeur Sanders can pick apart a soft defense. Like, I worry about Shedeur Sanders in terms of his total NFL potential, but I know he throws a pretty ball and I know he throws an accurate ball. And
definitely throws a pretty ball. That's for sure.
Yeah, he really does. You watch it, it's a tight spiral every single time. But he throws an accurate ball. And so if Oregon gives him space, he's going to pick them apart because the wide receivers are capable of beating these guys in the secondary that's rebuilding in Oregon. And so I think asking this Colorado offense to get, 3 touchdowns and 2 field goals or 4 touchdowns to hit this over for their total, I think they can still get blown out and hit this pretty easily.
My one concern for asking Colorado to do a lot of scoring in this game is obviously the loss of Travis Hunter, but also where I think Oregon is most susceptible to getting gashes on the ground. And Colorado hasn't, like, quietly in this Colorado 3-game run, they've been pushed around in the trenches, and it's been a lot of Shedeur Sanders needs to bail us out, and we need to get Horn downfield, Williams out on dump-offs. Williams hasn't been able to run through the tackles or bounce to the outside whatsoever. I mean, Colorado, 37% success rate. 37% success rate, 113th. 100th in success rate on the ground, 37% success rate, and then EPA per play 108. So they're not really ripping off chunk plays. It's been all downfield passes. And I want to give credit to Colorado State last week because they used their bye week to scheme up how to slow down Colorado. Of course, there were a lot of penalties, a lot of defensive scores, and that game was wild. Yeah, I just think Oregon has the size and the talent, like pure raw talent, to really mess around this Colorado defense, or Colorado offensive line. I think Texas Tech's offensive line is far bigger, far more talented, and that's where this game could really go sideways for Colorado. That being said, if Colorado gets bludgeoned, they're going to keep Shedeur in there to pick up his numbers, like 100%. So the gas pedal is going to be on until the bitter end for Colorado. That's why I don't necessarily – I'm not going against your play. I personally – my favorite bet in this one is just laying it with Oregon, minus 21, 3 touchdowns. This Colorado team, it's a nice story. but it ends here. This is a not terrible Colorado team anymore. This is a good Colorado team that's going to fight for bowl eligibility. It's a great season. That being said, they have very little depth. They are playing their fortunate game. They're traveling off a very emotional, late game, late kick on the road. Now you're playing a 12 Pacific time kick, 12:30, I should say, in Oregon, and they played Texas Tech 2 weeks ago, but last week they were messing around with Hawaii. They destroyed them 55-10. Colorado, 89th in net yards per play this season. So they've been getting outgained.
Yeah.
At a pretty substantial clip. Now you're playing an Oregon team. I mean, this team has zero issue putting up points. They put up 81 against Portland State, an FCS team, put up 38 against Texas Tech on the road. They thrive at home. I think that this is setting up for Colorado without Travis Hunter, who is their best player on defense and their best non-Shedeur Sanders player on offense. That's a huge loss that I think is just getting kind of glossed over in this whole thing. Like, we're just expecting Colorado. Like, I guess maybe people who aren't as well versed in the point spread, because this is a 3-touchdown spread. I just think Colorado, it's going to be, they could find themselves down 3 scores like that because they play fast. They haven't faced an offense that could really push them with a defense that could at least get in the backfield. TCU was half of that. Nebraska was the other half of that. Now you're seeing kind of a culmination here. I think Oregon smacks them. And don't forget what Dan Lanning said at Pac-12 Media Day. They asked him about Colorado, and he said, he doesn't care about them leaving or anything. And then obviously they end up leaving. But I think there's no love lost for these Colorado teams coming in on the road now, Pac-12 play. I think competition picks up, and I think Oregon runs it up even. I don't think there's they're going to stop.
No, I don't disagree with your assessment of Oregon absolutely dominating this game. Like, I kind of like the full game over, even if it's just really gross to bet over 70.5 points. Like, that's not a promising proposition. But I think that looking at the Colorado team total, I think you're looking at a situation, like you said, like they're not, even if they're, running on one cylinder because Colorado's beating them into the ground, they're still going to have every weapon out there to try and boost Shedeur Sanders' Heisman stock, to try and save some face. So I think like a backdoor cover on it is fully in play. Like, I'm not looking for a pretty 28 points. I'm just looking for 28 points.
But we do agree that the buff stops here. The Colorado Buffaloes, and they get handed their first loss. Again, Cody, Colorado team total over 24.5. I'm laying it with Oregon minus 21. Let's move to a top 10 matchup. Gets fourth billing on this show. That's how big this week is. Ohio State travels to Notre Dame to take on the Fighting Irish. Ohio State ranks 6th. They get back on track, much to Cody's dismay. Last week, with Kyle McCord as the starter, they really opened it up against Western Kentucky. Now on the road, first true road game against a Notre Dame team that also has not faced a ton of adversity this year. Sam Hartman looks like the part, 12 touchdowns and no interceptions. What was a questionable wide receiver group so far for Notre Dame has passed the test. Audric Estime on the ground has looked damn good, over 8 yards a pop so far this season. But again, Notre Dame, they're facing their first test. Both teams, 2 teams that I have questions for that are going to be answered on Saturday, so I'm excited to see what happens. Cody, how do you read this one? Ohio State laying 3.5, we'll call it, juicy 3.5, total now at 55.5. How do you see it?
So I'm with you. I have questions about both these teams. Even though Ohio State made me look like a complete moron last week against Western Kentucky, I think that might have been a misread of Western Kentucky on my part more so than a misread of Ohio State. Having said that, with 2 unproven teams coming into this matchup, I'm going Notre Dame plus 3.5 at home. If you have 2 teams who, like you said, are in the situation where we're still trying to kind of figure them out, but both performed well in the test that they've been presented to this point, I don't understand why Notre Dame is giving 3.5 at home in South Bend. I understand it's not the same, home field advantage as playing at the Shoe, but at the same time, like, you talk about Notre Dame's offense and Sam Hartman, and I understand the level of competition, although I would argue that NC State's defense is not, a pushover by any stretch of the imagination. And they hung 45 on them in a game where there was a lightning delay, which can also always
throw things.
That was a really weird game.
Yeah, there were a few of those lightning delays in week 2.
Yeah,
excuse me. I think some of those, not that like it's like Notre Dame was ahead in that game and deserved to win, but just like some of the like you get like some weird fluky things happen with lightning delays where like teams kind of lose control or like they come out flat, they come out, I think weird things, but continue.
No, you're fine. And I'm 100% with you, but at the end of the day, they still hung 45 on NC State.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like they've played the best defense between these two teams, in my opinion. Like in the 6 games that they've each played combined, and they put up 45 on them. But I think Notre Dame's defense is also being a little underrated. I understand that they also have not been tested, but when you look at the SP Plus rankings, which is, if you don't know, Bill Connolly's measurement in ESPN, it's a measurement of predictive efficiency. Essentially, they're not far behind this Ohio State defense that people are very much swooning over. Who they're ranked 5th in SP Plus, whereas Notre Dame is ranked 7th. This defense is quite good, and then you throw in Sam Hartman in this offense that really seems to be clicking on all levels. They also have one of the better offensive lines in the country. Like Joe Alt is a pro prospect at left tackle for Notre Dame. And you look at the situation, and I still have a ton of questions about Kyle McCord. Like beating up on a Western Kentucky defense that after what I saw last week and, digging a little more into it, might actually be one of the worst defenses in the country. Like that's not going to change my opinion on a quarterback who is now playing in his first real road test in South Bend against a top 10 team. I understand we have Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka who can make plays against anybody in the country, but I don't trust the quarterback to make those plays yet. And I have 5 years plus of Sam Hartman that says he knows how to make plays. Even if he hasn't had the best big game track record, he's looked like a different player because he's been given more freedom in this Notre Dame offense. And I have way more faith in that against, I think it's basically whose offense performs better in this matchup because I think both defenses are quite talented. And I have way more faith in Hartman and what we've seen from this Notre Dame offense consistently this season than I do Kyle McCord in Ohio State.
Fair points all around. I think I don't have a strong opinion on the side. The more I think about it, I kind of like Ohio State because I just feel like that defense might have another gear. Yeah. That being said, there's a lot of assumptions that I have about this game. There is 2 things I do know about this matchup between Ohio State and Notre Dame. It is that Ryan Day is very nervous and very scared and coaches very conservatively, and that Marcus Freeman is very nervous and very scared and coaches very conservatively. So my play on this game is going to be on the first half under 27.5 because I think that what I'm most confident in this game is that I think both coaches are going to keep this very close to the vest and they don't want to shoot the first arrow across the aisle. I don't think that Ohio State's – I watched that Indiana game in week 1. They didn't really let Kyle McCord take the top off the defense. They didn't really go for the jugular at all in that game. I don't think you're going to see Ryan Day try and blow out Notre Dame off the jump on the road. I think you're going to see a very slow, methodical start. I think you're going to see Travion Henderson really involved this one. He's looked much better and healthy now. I think you're going to see Ohio State try to take to the ground early and try to really impose their will with this offensive line. And maybe later on in the game, scheme up some open shots for Harrison and Egbuka downfield. So I think you're going to see Ohio State keep this on the ground. You look back to last year, Notre Dame's defense, their entire secondary is intact from last season. They limited Ohio State to 21 points in that game. That was a much more dangerous Ohio State offense at home, by the way. So I think Ohio State, again, you're going to see them ease into this game. On the other side, Notre Dame, a lot of this is game script dependent, but team is outside the top 20, outside the top 100 in pass rate this season and bottom 20 in plays per minute. So the team's playing slow and they're running a lot. I think their preference is to run the ball because I still don't trust these Notre Dame pass catchers against Ohio State secondary, which has some questions still. But again, I don't think this is one where you're going to see Sam Hartman come out slinging. I don't think this is a game where we're going to see him try to throw the ball downfield. Because again, I don't really trust Notre Dame's pass catchers all that much. And I think, Ohio State, with Jim Knowles there they were a sturdy run defense last year as the back 7 that really kind of cooked them against Michigan. I don't think Notre Dame, though, has the receivers to do that, especially early on. So I think you're going to see a very slow, buttoned up approach to this game. I think both coaches are going to coach very conservatively. I think it's going to take one mistake to really kind of open this thing up, whether it's a fumble or a turnover. The fluky play that goes either direction.
Yeah.
I don't want to necessarily predict who that's going to be. I guess you can make your own prediction on who that would be. But I think until that happens, until the big play happens, you're going to see a very conservative look. I think first half under all the way here. I think this could be something like 13-7, 13-10 at halftime. Very low scoring, in my opinion. I think, you're going to have two guys that like to kick field goals, two guys that have big defensive lines that are going to try and, bully at the point of attack.
Mm-hmm.
I think first half under is what I'm most confident in a game where I have a lot of questions.
I love that play. When I saw it on our pre-show notes, I saw that play and I was like, man, that's a really good play. Because not only I agree with everything you said about the conservative approach coming out of the gate, especially for two coaches who, despite a fair amount of wins to their credit, have questions from the fan base about their long-term viability. So like coming into a game of this magnitude, they're going to coach conservatively. But you also see that in a lot of these marquee matchups. Like first half under is actually a pretty solid play in a lot of these matchups. Like you mentioned Alabama, Texas earlier. They were both like, there were more shots taken probably, but at the same time, it was definitely, like you said, who's going to shoot the first arrow across the aisle. It was one of those situations. And I think we see that a lot in these big games. Going back to like my pick in the Notre Dame side, I think that this Ohio State defensive front, in terms of the front seven and particularly the front four, ton of talent. You've got JTT, you've got Jack Sawyer, like you've got a bunch of dudes there.
Yeah.
We haven't seen them make necessarily though, like the impact type plays, like the splash plays where they're penetrating into the backfield. Like they do their job solidly, but they're not, I'm trying to speak out of both sides of my mouth here. They're good players, but they're not been the, game changers that you sometimes see from guys, especially from someone like JTT, who was, bolstered as like one of the better recruits of that class. And so I think this Notre Dame offensive line is capable of finding success on the ground. Still plays to your first half under where we see a lot of run, but I think Notre Dame has every bit as much success in that regard as Ohio State can with Travion Henderson. So I think that Notre Dame stays in this game, whether it's low scoring or not. And I do think it's going to start off low scoring. But when you get to the second half and someone does make that mistake, I trust Notre Dame and Sam Hartman in this offense. Even if I am with you and being a little dubious of the pass catchers, I don't think it's necessarily going to be a game where we're going to see, the top taken off and that be the game-changing play.
Yeah.
I think Sam Hartman is the type of guy that kills you death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah, like third down conversions, big, like not necessarily a 40-yard bomb, but like 15 yards, like extends the play and makes the right read and finds the guy like near the sideline, like totally.
Yeah, three 15-yard completions in a row, and all of a sudden they're in the red zone. Like that's how Sam Hartman plays.
Meanwhile, the team moves so slow that 3 15-yard passes, like that's 2 minutes of game time right off the clock there. I think to me, these two teams, like Ole Miss, Alabama, to me, there's more with that, like under full game under, like there's more variance in that one. And maybe that's where I get killed. Cause like Lane Kiffin, is going to go for it a lot. He's going to try and push this. He's going to go for 2 when he's down 11 or whatever to make it 3. These two coaches coach like old men football, old man football. These two guys have zero interest in really getting creative and going for it. And, I think you're going to see a lot of punts early because I think both teams want to lean on their defense more. I think Marcus Freeman has a quarterback advantage, but he's a defensive guy at heart. And I think Ryan Day does not trust his quarterback yet, in my opinion. And this is not that maybe he does, but not right now. Not true road game. We got to get this one to keep up college football playoff. This is we want to lean on our defense here.
No, and I understand that I talk a lot of trash about Kyle McCord. I'm not saying he's never going to be good. I'm just saying I don't think he's good right now.
You got to see it first.
Yeah, absolutely. And but no, I'm with you. I'm like, if this game were to get a little off the rails, like you said, with the variance in Alabama, Ole Miss, like if this game were to have more variance, which I'm with you, I don't think it has a ton of variance in it. I think it's going to be in the second half, which is why I really like your play for all the reasons you mentioned. Like they're not, if we see them break from their tendencies, their conservative tendencies, it's not going to be in the first 30 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah. 100% agree. Last game we want to get to, make sure we hit on, is UCLA Utah.
Mm.
Utah opened a 6.5-point favorite. Now we got Utah as a 4.5-point favorite, total of 52.5. This is the Pac-12 opener for both teams.
Mm-hmm.
UCLA has given the keys to stud freshman Dante Moore, who has looked the part thus far.
Yeah.
Utah has not had Cam Rising. They've been able to navigate a pretty tricky non-conference schedule, even if it's been a little bit easier than expected. It's still beating Florida, and it's winning at Baylor before beating it's an FCS school, but one of the better ones in Weber State.
Mm-hmm.
This has been the expectation, though, that Cam Rising would be back for conference play. Hasn't been officially cleared, but has been practicing with no limitations. I saw a note that we're going to find out tomorrow, that being Thursday, that we're going to know if Rising's going to play or not. I think personally this number indicates that they don't know if he's going to play. I think it would probably shoot up close to 6.5, 7 if Rising plays, or it would go closer towards a pick if Rising does not play, in my opinion. So this is kind of like a halfway number. I don't know. I think that there's a lot of questions to be answered here. I think if Rising plays, is he going to be full systems go? Is he going to be a little rusty? Because don't forget, Utah's top pass catcher, Brent Kuthi, also a game time decision for this one. The hope was he would be back for conference play. We shall see. Cody, thoughts on this one? What is your read on the Cam Rising situation? Does that change your handicap? I guess we do have to kind of make some caveats in this one, but we'll give it a bet and we'll, try to give some context around it.
So I actually went into this pick with the fact that I'm with you. I don't know what to do with the Cam Rising situation, but that's why I'm going
to look it up and see if anything else came out.
I looked it up just before the show and I didn't see any new information. The last I saw was Whittingham said yesterday that it would be 48 hours basically. So Thursday, before we know anything. But when I, looked at the numbers, I'm going Utah team total under 28.5. And part of my reasoning is the Cam Rising uncertainty that's involved with that. Let's say Cam Rising doesn't play. Well, this is a team that without Cam Rising has gone over 28.5 just once, which was against, like you said, Weber State's one of the better, FCS teams, but they're still an FCS team. And they scored 31 against them. They've basically been running a version of a Wildcat offense since they since they figured out that Bryson Barnes was not very good. And so that's what they've been running. And if Cam Rising doesn't play, I see a situation where they're they're focusing almost solely on the run game against UCLA, and that's keeping the clock turning. And then you take into account that this game's at Rice-Eccles. They're going to want to control the game on the ground and with their defense. And that plays to, 28.5, they could score 4 touchdowns and still hit that under as a team total. And if they're playing that style of offense, I don't think they're scoring 4 touchdowns. I don't think they want to get that game in that range. And if Rising does play, you already mentioned it. What's he going to look like? This is a guy coming back from a torn ACL suffered in December of last year, or December.
New Year's
Day. Yeah. Might as well be December.
Yeah, whatever.
No, is the Rose Bowl, whatever. Anyway. But having said that, this is the first time we're going to see him in live game action. I understand that he elevates the offense if he's 100% healthy and 100% not rusty. I don't trust him to be 100% not rusty is the key. And then you talk about Kuthi, you talk about the overall weapons in this offense, they're diminished from what we saw last year with Utah. And so when I look at that and I look at Rising not being I think there's a chance that we could see him not be particularly sharp. I still think over 28.5 is a tough ask. So I like the under this team total.
Don't hate it. I think, again, you're trying to navigate show on Wednesday. Yeah. We don't know if the starting quarterback is going to play. I guess I'm going against you in a way, but what concerns me, and again, it's Dante Moore's first true road game playing in probably the toughest place to play in the Pac-12 in Rice-Eccles Stadium. That being said, if you go back and look at last year's Utah team, they struggled against the high-level offenses when they played them in the Pac-12. They let up 42 to UCLA on the road last year. They let up 42 to USC at home. They let up only 20 to Oregon, but if you go back and look at that box score, Bo Nix was banged up in that game, and he still passed for 300 yards and he couldn't move. He sat in the pocket and threw all over them. So if Dante Moore is going to be able to pass the ball down the field, I think that's going to put a lot of pressure on Utah. That being said, looking at UCLA's defense, I think D'Anton Lynn, the new defensive coordinator, has been a huge upgrade, but UCLA hasn't played anybody this year. And if you go back and look at last year, UCLA's defense was a leaky faucet, outside the top 100 across the board in things like success rate, EPA per play, yards per pass attempt. So I think Utah, if it's rising, I think obviously that raises the ceiling to this offense because there's a chance he hits the ground running and he looks really good coming off. Or he looks a little rusty, maybe he gets pulled. Or what I think is most likely is whoever plays quarterback is Utah knows that they need to score points in order to keep up with UCLA because UCLA is going to get their 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns. They're going to get into the mid to high 20s pretty, that's just how this game is going to work with the weapons they have and the scheme Chip Kelly runs. So I think Utah is going to have a solid scheme that's going to test a relatively unproven UCLA defense. So I went over 51.5. It just feels a little low in my opinion. I think, granted, there's some rising questions. So maybe that kind of raises the expectation if he's ruled in. I just think each team scores 4 touchdowns total and you're way over. That's 56. If you score 4 touchdowns, 28-28. Yeah. I think this number is leaning more towards like low 20s where I think I think UCLA, we assume this defense has gotten better, but we haven't necessarily seen it yet. Maybe Utah is able to scheme up a few plays similar to how they did against Florida. Meanwhile, I think UCLA's offense is set for a big day against Utah, even on the road, even with a true freshman quarterback. I'm pretty bullish on this UCLA offense cooking here. So I went over. I think that's a little rising independent. I don't think I'm like locked in that like I need rising to play for this to hit. I think even with Johnson or Barnes, I think that this could still get over given Utah's at home. And I think that they're going to scheme up a few deep shots. I think this game could be a little bit higher scoring than anticipated.
So with my leans, I actually think both of our play, like based on my leans.
But you think UCLA might like smoke Utah?
I don't think they're going to smoke them, but I think we could see 34-24 game, easily hit your over, Utah's under the team total. So like, I think we're in a situation where I think that whether rising plays or not, this UCLA defense is improved, but more importantly, I think that this Utah offense, rising or not, has way more limitations than we saw from the unit last year. And I think we're going to see that in this game, no matter who plays quarterback. And then specifically if Rising weren't to play or were to get pulled, like he, aggravates it or isn't, is showing too much rust or whatever. The offense that Utah's been running is obviously with more talent, but is very similar almost to what we've seen from San Diego State with their, inability to pass the ball, with how run heavy they've been, how part of the run game quarterback's been when Johnson's been in there for Utah. UCLA shut San Diego State down in San Diego. And I think that that's probably a bad sign for this Utah offense. And I think I lean towards UCLA winning somewhat comfortably, not like a blowout or anything, but somewhat comfortably. And I think that both of our plays in this game are very much in play with the way I see it playing out.
Yeah, we'll see. That should be an interesting one. Not going to get to the Washington State, Oregon State game, but also a game to know. Before we get out of here, let's do our, kind of our tentpole segments. We're going to do upset pick and sickos pick. Cody, a little bit faster. Upset pick. I agree with this one, by the way. This would have been mine if you didn't put it down first, or you win by getting to the outline first. What's your upset pick this week?
So yeah, I know this is a team you love. That's not why I picked them. I just love to play, but I have SMU plus 6.5, plus 220 on the money line against TCU. I mean, first off, it's the battle for the Iron Skillet, one of the funniest trophies in college football. But on top of that, I think odds makers are really looking at this game and factoring in the 28-11 Oklahoma loss for SMU. But when you look in those numbers, it's kind of what you were talking about earlier with Clemson and Duke. SMU actually outgained Oklahoma by 2 yards. Preston Stone.
I bet on SMU in that one. I'm well aware of what happened in that game.
Yeah.
3-point game in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. Preston Stone threw for 250. and the offense looked good, and and there was just a couple of ill-timed turnovers and a close game. But now they're up against a TCU team who I'm still dubious about the offense. I don't think Chandler Morris is very good. They haven't played anyone since losing to Colorado, where he made some crucial mistakes. But more importantly, I think TCU's defense is a huge step down from what we saw last year. Colorado diced them up. And SMU may not have the same high-end weapons as Colorado, but they're a better top-to-bottom offense than Colorado. And you have Rhett Lashley, who's a great offensive mind, coming in against this TCU defense. I think SMU is very live to win this rivalry game. And, 6.5 is too many points.
100% agree. Look at last year also. SMU went right at him. 42-34 final. SMU, you look – they couldn't really stop TCU. Granted, that was a much better TCU team. But SMU, total yards, TCU was able to hit more explosive, but total yards was a pretty near even game, 487 to 476.
Oh, yeah.
There's, to me, I agree with that. One that I'm looking at, you can find this at FanDuel at +4. That's a good teaser. Starts with a 4, +460. I was moved by that Boston College performance against Florida State. I was moved. Boston College catching 14 against Louisville. Haven't really seen a huge leap from Louisville this year under Jeff Brom. You go back week 1, they played Georgia Tech on a neutral field. Georgia Tech led for chunks of that game, back and forth, let up 33 points to them as well. Louisville ends up escaping with a win. They play Murray State. They play Indiana pretty tight. They win by 7 on the road, true road game, Big Ten opponent. I know Indiana's pretty poor, but Louisville gets away with that one. Now playing Boston College team, where I think that we need to start changing our perception, because Thomas Castellanos seems to have given life to this BC offense. Like I said earlier, passed for 300 yards, ran for almost 100. A lot of chunk plays from the BC passing game. Castellanos was picking up plays with his legs. I know Louisville is a pretty good defensive line, and they have explosive playmakers like Thrash and Jordan, but I think that this Boston College team is a team to start playing on with Castellanos here, and I don't think the numbers are truly capturing it. Came in against Northern Illinois, nearly let a comeback win there. This sounds brutal, I know. They hardly beat Holy Cross. But then they played a really, really spirited effort against Florida State. They were in that game. The defense obviously lackluster, but I think more Boston College struggles with mobile quarterbacks. And when guys get out of the pocket, that's not Jack Plummer. Jack Plummer's just going to throw him inside the pocket. So I think BC might be able to get home in this one and stay tight. I just think Louisville, this is a big, big expectation change. They were laying, what was it? I think it was 10 on the road against Indiana, didn't cover. They were laying like 7.5 against Georgia Tech on a neutral field, didn't cover. Again, big number here for Louisville. I just think, listen, maybe Boston College just sucks. They had like 18 penalties against Florida State. It was ridiculous. Maybe they're just done and Hafley's really done here, but I'll try with Castellanos. I think maybe there's something brewing here with BC, that they're a little bit better than their expectation.
Yeah, I mean, I think your reasoning behind it is sound. The one thing that would worry me is, it was the red bandana game last week, and I wonder, if that was kind of like everything they had in the tank to try and pull that off there at the end of that game, and whether or not there's a whole lot left in the tank moving forward, or whether or not they're the team that barely beat Holy Cross, that type of team.
2 touchdowns though. That's a bit, and
it's true.
2 touchdowns.
It's true. It's a big spread.
Yeah, we'll see. Of course, we can't get out of here though without a Sickos pick. What did we do last week? I think we both won our Sickos pick.
Yep. That was my one win.
Before we get out of here, I got to shout out Trent Dilfer. Rode the over again in UAB, Louisiana. This score, first of all, there's a rain delay for like 2 hours. It was 41-3 with 4 minutes left. Over whatever number, 57.5 through 59.5, wherever it closed. Over below 60. 41-3. UAB generates 2 turnovers and scores 3 touchdowns in the final 4 minutes and 10 seconds of action to get over every number under the sun.
Let's go.
Trent Dilfer. Have a day.
Super Bowl champion. You got to love a Super Bowl champ.
21 final. That's just playing to the final whistle. Trent Dilfer, an over-better's dream. All right, Sickos pick before we get out of here, Cody. What are you looking at?
After a long day of the best college football slate of the year, you've got to get the midnight Eastern time start time in Hawaii with New Mexico State visiting. I mean, who wouldn't want to be sweating out some late night action? I have New Mexico State +3 on the island in this game. You look at Hawaii, and I understand that they played 3 Power 5 teams to this point, but 2 of those Power 5 teams were Vanderbilt and Stanford, who – Power 5 is a very loosely used terms with those programs. And they rank 127th in defensive SP plus this season. This defense is horrendous. And you look at a New Mexico State team that is 2-2. They had an ugly loss to start the season against UMass that in a game that they should have won. And, it's kind of been up and down, but this team has been creating a lot of explosive plays. Tom Fernelli of CBS Sports shared something yesterday evening of the most touchdowns scored outside of the red zone this season. New Mexico State is tied for 7th in the country. They have 9 touchdowns scored from outside of the red zone this season. So they've been creating explosive plays at a pretty high rate that you wouldn't necessarily expect from this New Mexico State team. Diego Pavia is a quality player. He makes mistakes, but I just have more faith in this New Mexico State offense with Pavia in his second year starting than I do with this Hawaii offense that, understanding that they played some higher level competition, just hasn't really been that impressive, and has also thrown 6 interceptions already through 4 games this season. Pavea's thrown 4 for New Mexico State. I understand that as well, but I just have more faith in the explosiveness of this New Mexico State offense against a truly horrendous defense. This is probably going to be a shootout that I'm sweating for until like 3 a.m., but I'm willing to sweat it.
I love it. Going to the last game on the board. Mine is definitely going to be a sicko one. Sam Houston, give me the 12.5 against Houston. I love this Sam Houston team all year. I believe it was on the show. I took them against BYU, but this team, their offense is god awful. I will note that they've scored, I believe, 3 points through 2 games. Their defense is absolutely nails. And I will say, coming off of a early bye week, getting a full week to prepare for this Houston team that really looks all out of sorts. I mean, 127th in offensive EPA per play, 116th in defensive EPA per play. They probably should have lost to UTSA, which would have made them 0-3 on the year. They're not laying double digits against Sam Houston, which, again, they haven't won an FBS game yet. You know that this is a veteran team based on them jumping up from the FCS ranks, and they've been competitive. They lost at BYU. That was a very competitive game. Their quarterback, Shoemaker, is just awful, like so bad. It's not going to be a pretty one. But they played hard against Air Force. They lost 13-3. They're, again, off a bye. I don't know if Houston's really getting up here. I think that they're already circling the drain after getting smoked by TCU. They lost to Rice in overtime the week before that. Big number here. I can't get here. I'm going to take the points to Sam Houston State. I think that they could keep this relatively close. And honestly, upset is not out of the realm of possibility whatsoever, because I think this Houston team is like, it's one of those where the numbers almost can't catch up to the psyche around the team. And as the year goes on, you start to pinpoint those ones you want to start playing against. And I just don't know if Houston is rallying, like circling the wagons here. Like, hey, we lost to TCU in our first Big 12 game. We got another non-conference game against a team that has not scored a touchdown yet in the FBS. Like, let's get up. I think Sam Houston, the way their defense has been playing, I think that they could hold up here. And honestly, maybe this is the upset pick.
No, I mean, I like it too. Like, I think we're on full how long until Dana Holgorsen gets fired watch. And
you can't calculate Saturday night.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't calculate that against, the numbers. Like, the team may just be done with him because they know he's gone. So
yeah, 100%. Cody, we had a bunch of picks this week. We over an hour breaking down this loaded week 4 slate. Do you want to go through your picks?
Yeah, I'll rapid fire these. So I got Florida State -2.5 over Clemson. I have the Alabama Ole Miss over 55.5. Oregon, Colorado. I'm going Colorado team total over 24.5. Notre Dame, Ohio State. I have Notre Dame +3.5. UCLA, Utah. Give me the Utah team total under 28.5. Upset pick. SMU is taking down the Horned Frogs. SMU +220 on the money line, +6.5 on the spread. And then Sicko's pick, New Mexico State +3 against Hawaii. Last game on the slate.
Yeah, let's get over 500 this week. But you can't get the Ole Miss Alabama over because I took the under 55.5. I also took the over 55 in Clemson, Florida State. I took Oregon minus 21 against Colorado. The first half under 27.5 in Notre Dame, Ohio State. I took over 51.5 in Utah, UCLA. I took BC plus 14, sprinkle on the plus 460 money line, and Sam Houston State plus 12.5 against Houston. A lot of totals for me. Great show though, Cody. This was we went deep here. If you are still listening and you didn't sign up for DraftKings just yet, what are you doing? Because we have this great promo for you. If you sign up, deposit $5 and bet it, you get $200 in bonus bets. And then also, if your bet loses, you get $150 back in bonus bets. Just use the code STB. That stands for this great show, Stacking the Box. It's College Football Edition. All the details are in the episode description right below us. Right there, if you're watching on YouTube, you could see the offer right in front of you. Again, that's Cody Williams. I'm Reed Wallach. You can follow him on Twitter at TheSizzle20. You can follow me on Twitter at Reed Wallach. We will see you next Wednesday. Best of luck with all your bets. Let's get over 500. Why don't we? Enjoy the weekend, guys.
Let's do it.